Hello, everyone. This is Matt Hoots with Rated Green, and I've got a special guest today, Dr. John McKeon. He is CEO of Allergy Standards, and they have a company that helps you determine which materials that you use in your home, office, and building, in the built environment to make sure that you are not bringing toxic chemicals into your built environment. So he's going to explain why they do this and also how you can use their standard to feel more passionate and comfortable about your living space, and for sure. So, Dr. McKeon, I really appreciate your time, and we had an amazing discussion before about the need for this, and indoor air quality is a hot topic these days, especially as we're all having to work from home, work from our businesses. In some of these extreme temperatures, we can't go outside, so we have to be inside. So you guys have come up with a way to let people be indoors and also be healthy at the same time.
Yeah, well, hi Matt. I really appreciate you having me on today. A great opportunity to speak to your audience. So if I maybe just take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about my background of my story and why I founded Allergy Standards. As you mentioned, I'm an ER physician by training. But what I noticed many years ago is a lot of parents with kids with asthma and allergies, and generally anybody who's interested in indoor air quality, but particularly those with asthma and allergies, get told by their healthcare professionals to try and avoid the trigger factors that set off their symptoms of asthma and allergy. And a lot of these turn up in the indoor environment. As you well know, we spend 90% of our time indoors. And actually these days with homeschooling and working from home, we're very much indoors more than ever. And people would get confused by the advice that they could hear from various different groups about avoiding dust mites or avoiding cockroach allergens. But there's other things that turn up in your indoor environment, such as VOCs from cleaning products or outgassing from furniture. So people felt quite overwhelmed when they were trying to select better products to bring into their indoor environment. So that's where we came up with the idea of having this certification mark. So we will test consumer products such as vacuum cleaners, furnace filters, paint and floor coverings. And if they reach our criteria, we'll actually badge them with that certification mark. So at the point of purchase, or if online, you're looking for products that help contribute to a better indoor environment, you can look for our certification mark.
Got it. So it sounds like your certification is more for the product versus the process. So you're not necessarily telling people, hey, if you use this product, it's going to maintain a certain humidity level and you can stop dust mites. You're basically saying if you use this product, it's not going to allow dust mites to necessarily grow on it, because like bed coverings and stuff like that, I know it's a big one for allergies. Is that one of the criterion that you guys look at? With carpets and things like that?
Yeah, well, we take very much a whole of house approach. So we don't say there's one magic bullet. It's not a particular type of vacuum cleaner. And we're actually not even recommending the products. What we do is we certify these products that they will have an impact on your indoor environment. So the outcome is to have a better indoor environment, a better air quality. And we are saying that these products that we've tested, they will help you achieve that outcome.
Now, what are some of the types of products that you guys test? You mentioned vacuum cleaners, and I know there's lots of different information on vacuum cleaners. So with vacuum cleaners, like what are you testing? Are you looking at, okay, if you use this vacuum cleaner, it's going to trap so much of the particulates. This is the size of the particulate. It's not going to stir up the air. It's not going to off gas, the actual vacuum cleaner itself. Like, what are you looking at in a vacuum cleaner, for instance?
Yeah, well, a lot of the things that you just said there, but we will test it in a systematic way. And we actually model a lot of the internationally accepted standards. Like in Europe is the IEC standards, in the US is ASTM, the American Society of Testing Materials. So we actually look at a lot of the way they test, but we'll actually add special features to the testing related to allergens. So as you were saying there, if you would consider what's the criteria of a certified vacuum cleaner, we would look at its ability to pick up allergens, but not only pick up allergens, that it's trapping them and filtering them and locking them away inside the vacuum cleaner. We would then look at when you empty it, whether it's a dust cup or a bag machine, what actually happens when you empty it, and we'd also look when you're cleaning if there's a beta bar or any kind of mechanized action to then actually stir up allergens in the air. And then we actually even will look at the motor. A lot of motors and vacuum cleaners can actually produce carbon filters. Some of them can even produce ozone. So we holistically look at the product, that it's capturing allergens, picking them up well, but just as you said, it's not redistributing them. They're being locked away. There's very good sealed filtration system on the vacuum cleaner as well.
Well, these seem like very tough testing standards. I mean, just ozone alone. I mean, most motors put off amounts of ozone that are harmful for indoor air quality, and that's something that most people don't think about. But I guess the good news is that I know you don't certify the product. You allow them to use your certification, and it's more of a verification process. But there are products that are verified that are vacuum cleaners. It sounds like so. Like the good news is there might actually be a vacuum cleaner that is good for indoor air quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've identified the problem, but there's no good just identifying it if you're then not going to offer a solution for it. So there is a solution, yes, and we have a number of websites you can look at. Our company is called allergystandards.com, and if you go there, you'll actually see our testing criteria. But then for US listeners or viewers, if they go to asthma and allergyfriendly.com, there's a full list of registered products off there. And we also work very closely with our educational partners, who are the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, and their website is afa.org. And they have tons of really, really good content, as well as a register of certified products as well.
So what are some surprise products that people typically would think are good for indoor air quality that, through your testing methods, you've identified as like, what, this may sound like it's a holistic or a green or sustainable product, but in fact, it's actually off-gassing and putting more VOCs into your environment than you would have expected?
Yeah, well, the whole issue of sustainability, recycled, is something that sometimes gets confused with healthy and wellness products. I mean, the whole concept of wellness now is so developed in people. I mean, we're back in Europe now, we've gone into lockdown, so our gyms aren't open. And it's interesting, people want to go to the gym, not to work out particularly, but it's really for mental health issues they want to go. So people are really making that connection between their environment and being well. The other issue is people are now beginning to work out kind of green claims, sustainability claims, and products that are actually good for people. Good for the environment is obviously important, but they need to be good for people as well. So where that turns up for us is in recycled content in the textile industry. People may see green or eco fibers or green or eco pillow products, for example. But we have seen examples in our testing where they're made from recycled content, which is great for the environment because it means plastic bottles may not go to landfill. But often we've seen increased levels of outgassing from those types of products as well. So post-production recycling sometimes can have less verification over it. So it is something to watch, that certain green label products are sustainable, but they may need to be double checked for other kind of health-based advantages.
And that's a good point. I mean, sometimes, we consume quite a bit of cereal here in the US, and sometimes they'll say, hey, this is whole grain, but they don't really talk about all the other things that are in it. So they're promoting one aspect that may sound like, hey, this is, I'm not sure if I want to call it necessarily greenwashing, but it kind of is. It's not a holistic approach. So what are some other issues with, because I know lots of other toxic things that are inside a house. So what are some of the categories that you see that people are not aware of that they really should be aware of? Because I know furniture, for instance, I'm not sure if you guys test furniture, but there's a lot of things that we have to add to furniture so it doesn't burn. A lot of those flame retardant chemicals are not necessarily good for humans to breathe. So furniture, I know you say you guys do flooring. So what are some of the I guess the more toxic categories that you see out there that people should be aware of and should go to your site to see some of the healthy alternatives?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. There is always this natural tension between competing attributes you want to have with a product. You mentioned there flame retardants. We're not anti-chemical, and we think obviously the chemical industry has added a fantastic amount to our health and wellness. I think you just need to have a balanced approach to that you're not trading off too much for one attribute that you now may make a product that can be irritant to somebody who's got sensitive airways. So I think the trade-offs are always there, and as long as you stick to the science and the evidence, it's important. I mean, one point you made there about just looking at single attributes of products is really interesting. For, again, to go back to our pillow standard, we have seen products on the market that have good allergen filters, so there's a good barrier, and the retailer or the brand have actually gone to the trouble of doing testing to make sure it is a good allergen filter and it traps allergens. But they probably haven't then gone on and look at the chemical attributes of the product. And so we've seen products that are labeled good for people, or a good choice for people with asthma and allergies, because they've got a good dust mite allergen trapping ability, but they outgas quite a lot of VOCs, or they may have allergenic chemicals in the dyes. So that's an example of where you've looked at one attribute, but you've forgotten about other attributes. So it's very important when you're looking at certification programs or certification labelings that they do a whole of product and they look at all the product attributes and not just focus in on one attribute.
You brought up a very good topic these days, filtration, because everyone's worried about like which filters are going to work best for our environment to take some of these pathogens out of the air, some of the microparticles out of the air, because we're stuck inside, like you said, 90+% of the time, depending on what your job is. And with that, I mean, so it sounds like you might have some filters on your website as well that you've tested and recommend that you're not necessarily trapping one particulate and then off-gassing a VOC. And I know, one of the concerns that I've seen, because from the indoor air quality perspective and building and recommending things to our clients, is that some of these machines, like you said with the vacuum cleaners earlier, some of these filters are actually producing ozone, which is one of the things that we're trying to avoid. Yeah. So, with like, what are some of the criteria that you're looking at when it comes to just testing filters to make sure that consumers are safe?
Yeah, well, it's a big issue, that whole issue of filtration. So if I kind of break it down into a couple, there's one of our pet irritants is the concept of when the word HEPA is misused. Now, HEPA it's very important criteria to a filter, but often the filter itself may have been tested in isolation and be HEPA grade. But when it's put into the product, like a vacuum cleaner, for example, the air may not be all passing through it. So technically, the manufacturer isn't telling an untruth by saying there's a HEPA filter. But when you actually look at that whole unit and test it, the air is escaping around the side of the HEPA and things like that. So that's one thing to look for, is where make sure that when words like HEPA are used, that what does it actually mean for the product. And there's obviously in Europe, we're probably more familiar with the MERV rating, and there's different grades. So it is quite challenging for people when they're looking at filtration capabilities, the ASHRAE standards. They're all very, very technically sound, but they can be quite complicated and they don't quite resonate enough with people. And then certain words that do resonate, like HEPA, can often be actually, people can be a little bit economic with the truth, as we'd say here, about how it actually functions. So there's some of the things we would look at, and to look at the manufacturer's claims around a product like that. And then the aspects you mentioned about ionic air cleaners, particularly obviously at the moment, coronavirus is a big issue, and people are really concerned about airborne pathogens. But you need to be careful again to carefully research literature, because people will have, there's UV air cleaning devices, there's photocatalytic oxidation, there's ionizers, there's ozone producers. So there's a whole methodology of way people clean air. But often the air may be running too quickly through the machine for the UV to actually have an impact. The ozone may cause harmful cleavage products, byproducts like free radicals. So again, it's a very, very complicated area, and we're trying to help people navigate that difficult science.
Got it. Yeah, and so with some of the MERV ratings you mentioned, are you doing actual tests on the filters themselves to see if they can trap the things that, so like a MERV 13, traps down to 1/3 of a micron. So do you have like a testing facility that's saying, okay, this filter is claiming to be MERV 13, and we've tested it to make sure that it's actually trapping the particulates at the rate that it's claiming? Is that something that you guys do?
Yeah, certainly. We use a number of laboratories. One we use in North America is SGS IBR, and it's actually a world-renowned particulate filtration laboratory. And what's unique about our testing is we don't use just dust particulates alone. A lot of the standard market tests will just look at a benign inert dust with laser beam counters, particulate counters, and so forth. And they may do single pass, so they put the filter in a duct, do upstream and downstream, or they may do room filtration. What we generally focus on is actually look at the allergens themselves. So we will spike a standard test dust with known allergens.
Wow.
They may be pollen type allergens, dust mite allergens, and cat dander. They normally will give you the full spectrum. The dust mites being normally greater than 10 microns, pollen's being somewhere in between, and cat danders right down to your ultrafine particles, you know, 1, 2, 2.5, as it were, PM2s, etc. But we will actually then, when we analyze the samples, not just look at dust particles and dust particle counting, we will look at allergen capture in the filter, if it's a media-based filter, and then we'll actually look at the impact in the air where the product is supposed to be working. So we will do full air exchanges of walk-in climate controlled chambers and actually look at the impact in the room where people will be, rather than doing a single pass kind of media filtration test.
And you mentioned cat dander. I was doing a report, and I was using some information from the EPA, and that was one of the things they mentioned. I didn't see anything about dogs, didn't think about hamsters, birds, but I noticed that cats were listed as a an allergen. I mean, or basically a toxic. It was mold. I want to say it's VOCs, ozone, and then cats. And I'm like, wait a second, like why are cats like worse than some of these other ones? And I don't know if you can have the time to explain that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's talking about this kind of soup or this milieu of the indoor air. You're right. They generally get broken down into kind of chemical irritants, your VOCs, and then you look at mold is one big issue. Then there's allergens, which we can break down. And then there's kind of your infectious agents, bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens, and endotoxins. So people will kind of break down what's in our air that can actually cause harm. And one of the, if you could call it, one of the good things that's come out of coronavirus or COVID is that people are now a lot more switched on to air. Normally it was, well, I can't see it, or my filter is out of sight, out of mind, and it's not something that people really consider. But now people are really connecting the dots around air quality. It has made the invisible visible, and people are getting the fact that the quality of my indoor air will actually have an impact on the quality of my health and the quality of my life. So I think that's the shift that's happened, and there's that terrible expression, the new normal. But I think people being really focused on quality indoor air is going to be part of the new normal, and we're not going to go back to the old ways. And then to take your point about cat allergen, yeah, if you look at the literature, most of the studies have been done on cat allergen for a number of reasons. And they feel if you're going to take let's call them animal danders, so your cockroach, your mouse, all those kind of the animal allergens, as it were, they've seen that most of the tests, if you do it on cats, that's a good proxy and will mean your air cleaner or your vacuum cleaner. It will do the same for dog, canine allergen, dog allergen. So generally the allergen of choice for that type of group, the scientists will choose cat dander, or FeLD1 is the name of the allergen, because it persists the most. It's probably the smallest. It stays airborne. It's a salivary droplet actually from the cat licking themselves. Skin cells. So it's the one that most of the testing is done on. And if you're good with cat dander, you can assume you're actually very good at clearing other animal danders as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it wasn't necessarily dander. It was cat saliva, and then it was radon, and then I was like, wow, is cat saliva really that toxic compared to radon? And does it merit to be on the same list? But you bring up a good point. You're just talking about cats, but some of these same things could be from other animals as well. It doesn't mean the dogs are out of the that they've escaped scrutiny. They have dander and fur and stuff as well.
Sure, sure. I mean, it is worthwhile pointing out that if you're allergic to it, it's this is an allergy issue. So it's where you would have, you raise an excessive response. Your own immune system raises an excessive response to proteins in the environment, which could be quite normal for other people. So when you're talking about something like radon or an infectious agent like a virus, that applies to everybody. Allergen specifically is most important for people who are allergic to that allergen. But generally what you find that if you are controlling all these triggers at source, or if you're ventilating correctly, or you're filtering correctly if you need to, and you're applying those principles, you will improve air quality, and healthy indoor air is good for everybody.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point. Like we're trying to control the triggers. You're not going to get it down to zero, because I know some people are trying to, like, hey, I want, instead of 500 microparticles per million, I'm looking at, like, I want to get it down to zero. That's not really possible. We're trying to reduce the amount that where your body's tendency to want to fight that. I mean, because if you just have a little bit, it's not that bad. If you have more of it, then your body starts to react to that. And as a green builder, I've noticed that my clients, their feedback is like, you've built an amazing house. And one thing I've noticed is, like, I'm not putting tissue on the shopping list. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's a nice side effect. We're making it more comfortable. We were looking at energy efficiency and health, but a lot of times health gets, is one of those byproducts of a better built environment. But with that, if you have a better built environment and then you bring a bunch of toxins into it, like you said, with air cleaning, some of the furniture and some of the what the occupants do, then that's an issue. So it sounds like you kind of deal with both sides. You deal with some of the building products, because you mentioned flooring, but you also deal with some of the consumer products. And the message that we've talked about earlier was, like, you need to look at everything, and also how you're living in the house, even with your vacuum cleaner, because that's one of the biggest things I saw in this one article is, like, just you need to vacuum your house. I mean, you can have all these healthy things, but if you don't keep your house clean, then that's an issue. So, but you also test vacuum cleaners. So you've got everything covered, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, I mean, you put that very well, but you're right. Well, ultimately, what you're talking about is wellness. And, we even mentioned about lifestyle people have. We all have our wearables now, our smartphones. We can measure, we have sensors. People are really a lot more switched on about how their environment impacts on their health. And we know from behavior change studies that your environment has the biggest impact on lots of health-based outcomes, whether they're giving up smoking or taking up exercise, it's your peer groups, how you surround yourself and your environment. So there's lots of emerging data now, both at home and even in places of work, where we've looked at people's ability to concentrate, miss days of work. I know you're an expert around energy, but we spend about, say, of a company, 10% of the overhead will go into energy bills, and you can make a big impact on the environment and your own bills by having energy efficiency measures and doing an energy audit. And absolutely, we should all be doing that. But if you also think about 50% of the company's overhead often can be from your employees. And if they're not working at best capacity because the air exchange is bad, because there's high levels of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide or nitrous oxide, and people are falling asleep after their lunch and so forth, that's not serving your business either. So there's so much more thinking going into now around, of course, energy is important, and of course carbon dioxide is very important for the planet, but also let's look at VOCs for people, and let's look at airflow and air quality for the people in the buildings. So that combination of how we design them, how we build them, then how we maintain and how we live in them and work in them, bringing that whole conversation through, I think, is really where a lot more of the research is going to be in the future.
Yeah, and as far as what you guys are offering the general public and also other businesses, one, I understood that you have some of these products listed that have been verified to meet the claims of, that have tested and they can see those results. You also mentioned you do some consulting if somebody's, hey, I want to have your logo and your standard on our product, you can help them get there. But also if they're there, you can also do the testing so they can use it. So let's talk a little bit about the consulting and the verification side of the business. Like, how do product manufacturers come to you? Like, what's like, do they go to a salesperson? They go to their site? Like, how do they get in touch with you to start this process to put out a better product?
Sure. Well, I mean, our mission and our values are all about helping people find and identify products that can actually have an impact on their environment and improve lives. So that's what we want to do. One of our Kennedy moonshots is trying to eradicate all emergency room visits for asthma and allergies that occur due to exposure to an avoidable indoor trigger. Like that's something that drives us. So if you are a product manufacturer or even an architect or a designer who's interested, we really want to help you get your product tested and get it certified, get it up onto our website, and disseminate that information through our educational partners, such as the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. And if you haven't got a product that will actually reach our criteria, we're also very happy to help you innovate and work with you as you're developing products that for the future that will reach the criteria. We kind of say there's no point us catching you doing something wrong after the event.
Yep.
It doesn't really serve anybody. What we want to do is work with you much earlier on, maybe throughout your supply chain, through your component suppliers, or people that make even right down to the chemical constituents that go into products. And if we can work with your value stream and your supply chain to actually innovate and improve products and get products to market, we're very happy to work with the R&D team. And we do that a lot from a technical point of view, but also then how you'll communicate that advantage in the marketplace through persona mapping and making sure the people who are interested in this are connected to your product. And we really encourage customers of ours and their customers to have conversations around science and challenge people around science, because the best companies will always win because they generally invest the most in innovation and better science.
And that's an amazing research, because I mean, resource that you offer during the R&D phase, research and development, because if you're trying to go back and retrofit and fix a product that's already developed, it's much more expensive than putting some of these best practices into the development stage. One of the things that I've noticed that I guess the pushback that I get from people, I mean, if you have extreme allergies, you're pretty aware that you're sneezing and you're in a bad environment. A lot of people don't realize how bad their environment is until they make subtle changes. So I was talking to a doctor, and he got a special cover for his father for his bed, and then he said, you know what, I'm actually waking up and like I don't have a runny nose anymore. He didn't really think he had allergies. He just thought that was just something that was normal. You wake up with a runny nose every morning, but that's not the case. And I think bringing awareness to people that you can, even if you don't think you have allergies, you can develop allergies possibly, from what you've told me, just by being in a toxic environment. Your resistance rate goes low. So I think one of the challenges, like what you're doing is not necessarily just for people that have allergies. It's for people that don't have allergies, because if your body's fighting all these different chemicals and having to absorb them and react to them, then it's not, your immune system isn't able to fight the other pathogens. And I think you brought up a good point. We need to keep allergy related things out of our ER for obvious reasons right now. We're in a pandemic, so we need to make sure the ventilators are used for the right reasons, not because we brought too much formaldehyde into our house. So like what are you guys doing for awareness for people that don't think they're sick but they really are sick and just not aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the story of the pillow you mentioned there, that the mechanisms for why people would have runny noses aren't well understood. I think what is understood well is that when we improve our air quality, for whatever reason, whether it's an allergy-based issue or a non-allergy based, it was an irritant from a toxin, we know that the science tells us that better indoor air, people have better health outcomes. What it actually was, we don't like to stray into kind of clinical claims or anything like that. It's very, very important that we don't make clinical claims, we don't make cause and effect that this pillow had an impact.
Yeah.
I think what it is becoming aware. You mentioned there people being aware, whether it's doing more exercise or losing weight. Everything needs to start with awareness, and then it becomes onto behavior change. And one thing our certification program is very good at is that it gets people to engage around the issue, and they get empowered, and they start learning, and they may download some of our educational material, and they start to get more engaged around the issue. And that in any area of your life, we see better outcomes once people get engaged and become interested in that. So that's one of the big takeaways that we see.
And so it's Allergy Standards is the name. So obviously most people think about allergies or things that are in the air that we're breathing. But there's also other types of allergies. You've got skin allergies. You may have internal allergies to some of these chemicals. So do you kind of deal with all different types of allergies, or is it more airborne related allergies?
Mainly airborne related allergies around the air quality. We don't do food. That's one area that we don't work with. Our educational partners, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, do have an organization they partner with called Kids with Food Allergies. So if anybody is food allergies, there's a lot of information on their website. But we will, when you mentioned about skin, obviously our textile-based certifications are related to chemicals and harsh dyes and other things that can get into textile to improve its finishing, or sometimes they can get improved even at the growing of cottons and residual pesticides. So a lot of our textile-based standards will relate to skin allergies as well, contact dermatitis, but it's mainly the airborne allergens, because the products that we look at are about impacting the quality of air. And as you mentioned earlier about people who just feel better when they engage with it, and there may not be asthma, or it may not be an allergy, or it may not be allergic rhinitis or hay fever. It could be other things like VOCs, and anybody will be irritated by a high level buildup of VOCs in the indoor environment, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, and also the products we have in our home have an additive effect. So what you're cleaning the floor with, and then outgassing from the furniture, and then you stack something else. It could be some candles people have. And if you stack that on top of each other, after a while, when you seal that building for energy efficiency, you are going to get a buildup of irritants in that area. And we should all be switched on about that, whether you have asthma or allergies. That's an issue that's relevant to everybody. Sometimes when I give these talk, just when I'm talking to the audience, a show of hand who has asthma, and it's normally around, it's 20 million in the US with asthma, and then I'll say who has allergies, and that's about 60 million in America, and then finally I'll ask, well, who here actually breathes? And all the hands go up in the audience. So we all breathe. So what we breathe should be important to us. And like the goldfish in the bowl who doesn't see the water, often we're walking around and we're the last to realize that the air we're breathing is not as clean as it could be. We don't eat our food off dirty plates. We don't drink dirty water. Air is actually, if you look at food and water, the thing we consume the most on a daily basis. It's the largest thing we consume every day, but yet often it's the thing we overlook the most.
That's true. So it sounds like your target market, was usually people say they're looking for a warm body, but you're looking for a warm body that can breathe, and that's who you're trying to help.
That's right, and healthy.
And healthy. Yeah, that's true. Well, I definitely appreciate your time with this. Are there any, misconceptions in the marketplace that we need to address when it comes to allergies and indoor air quality? I'm sure there's a ton of them out there. I know we hit quite a few topics in this session, but is there anything out that we missed that we need to discuss that can help people live a better, healthy, and a life centered on wellness?
Yeah, I think it's the takeaways I'd like to leave I'm not sure, is it viewers or listeners, or what we say these days on the webcasts and podcasts, but your audience. What the message I'd like to leave is, it is very much a whole of house approach. Just as your design professionals you'll work with, you look at designing a home. where people are going to live. And let's look at all aspects of that home. And it's not just building a sustainable building, which is really, really important for the planet. It's about how we're going to live in that building, or that energy efficient building, that high performance building, how we live there after it's built. The material science is good, but then how we're going to ventilate it, how we're going to light it, how we're going to heat it, and what products we bring in there, how are we going to clean it on a daily basis. So it is very much a whole house approach, I think, is important. And there are no magic bullets. But it's also then getting engaged, and that educational component I mentioned about. It really is behavioral change, how we live on a daily basis, and to gain an understanding that air quality and health in the built environment is important. So it's not just focus on one product, it's not just focus on a single issue, it's have that holistic thinking, and then get educated, get empowered, and really research the topic so you feel in control.
And you mentioned you have a lot of these educational tools on your website. So what is the website that people need to go to get access to some of this information?
Sure, I'll give you two, more kind of B2B, business to business, professional services and technical information is on allergystandards.com. We have educational programs there. We have the Allergy Research Institute, and we have our academy. That's all on that website. And then for consumers and mums and dads and people who are really interested in the whole issue, I would recommend going to our US educational partners, and that's aafa.org, AAFA.org.
Okay. Got it. Well, I definitely appreciate your time and sharing all this wonderful information with the audience. I learned something here as well. And again, it's keeping these conversations going so people better understand their consumer, because once you buy the product, you're kind of stuck with it unless you're going to take it back. But even still, you want to make sure that you buy products that are best for you. And you know, from the house, like you said, this holistic approach. And I think people are becoming more aware of what to do and how to buy this. And it's good that we have resources like yours to help. And I'm definitely going to check out the vacuum cleaner one. I want to make sure my vacuum cleaner made the list. I hope it did. If not, you know, because it's, you know, I did learn something from you. And I was aware of the HEPA issues when it comes to HVAC systems, but I didn't really think about it on a vacuum cleaner, because like, what about all the bypass air that doesn't go through the filter? And now I've got to test mine to make sure that it's worth it. So if not, we'd be buying a new one. So we do have allergies in our house, unfortunately. We've got lots of humans and pets and stuff, so we've got to deal with that.
Okay. Sure. Well, listen, we really appreciate it coming on. I've enjoyed our discussions. I think your programs and Rated Green and your own business, what you're doing is really raising that bar and challenging people to get involved. So we really appreciated having the opportunity to speak to you.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Okay.